So here we are. This is a wonderful re-meeting for Kevin and me. We spent a wonderful several days together in California in his part of the world, really at the beginning of the whole tour of Golden Civilization and Golden Civilization Conversations. And he was kind enough and creative enough to bring me into one of the big buildings there in San Francisco with some wonderful team members of his in the company he's been with. And then we traveled. We traveled to Sepastopol and saw another Golden Civilization Conversation, had many wonderful conversations. And I was just delighted with all of that. And all of that had come out of just a few weeks before Kevin and I had been at one of our 5-day trainings. And if I recall, and he has become launched as a very fine life planner, registered life planner, I believe. So with that said, Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to see you.
It's great to see you. I know, we just had such a wonderful time, and it meant so much to me. There I was in this strange city, and Kevin just took me from place to place.
I think I was on the winning hand of that, though.
I don't know. But we did. We had a wonderful, wonderful time. And Kevin, I think one of the reasons I was excited to get him on here was because he has had one of the first views of what Golden Civilization Conversations were looking like and how people were responding to them. So I'm really curious. It's been what, 6, 8, 9 months now.
It has.
Yeah. What are your thoughts since then?
You've launched me onto something, a path I never thought I'd go on, and a path that I'm very thankful for. Back in January, right after I had met you in Hana and spent some time in Hana with you when you were in San Francisco, I actually had the privilege of seeing 2 Golden Civilization Conversations happening. And they were, what was enlightening to me was the vision of a Golden Civilization were very similar between the 2 groups, but the outcome of each of them and the obstacles that each group saw and the personal action steps that arose from those conversations were illuminatingly very different.
Wow. Wow. And that is, that's very insightful, and it's coming right from the beginning that you would see that in those 2 conversations. And it's been true wherever I've gone that the vision is very similar, even, in India and Mumbai, in Hong Kong, where they're struggling with democracy right now, really all over the world. And I've been now to some very conservative parts of America as well as very liberal parts. And the vision is actually very similar. So tell me what you saw in that vision that was similar, and then how did you see the differences in the obstacles and the action steps? And by the way, for those of you who haven't been participant yet in a Golden Civilization Conversation, the structure is you create the vision and you make it so inspiring that people can't say no to it. And it's the same structure we use in life planning. So the notion is let's fix what is wrong in civilization, and let's do it in a generation. And we do it by creating an inspiring vision. And then we look at what are the obstacles, and then we look at action steps. And the best of the groups go on and on. I think the 2 that Kevin's referred to haven't been ongoing, but they were really wonderful beginnings. And we could easily go back, I think, and revivify them. So tell us what you saw, Kevin.
Yes, and we definitely need to revisit, especially for my group. It's funny you should ask. I took a look this morning at my photos I had taken of all the charts that we wrote up. And in my group in San Francisco, the obstacles were corruption, money, and greed, we can lump those together. Religious beliefs and fear were the top three obstacles that they chose. Wow. Or they highlighted. And the action steps that arose from those were self-awareness training, basic resources for all, and financial education, which turned out to be the path that I'm going down. That I've found that I have a lot of energy and passion towards helping others develop the financial education they need to make the proper choices to find freedom in their lives.
Fabulous.
So that was for the first group. And then in contrast, so you take, I don't want to make conclusions on the differences in the groups, right. But we had a very more corporate environment in San Francisco. And then in Sepastopol, a little different environment. And you had mentioned something about being in more conservative or in other areas of the world. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall to see those conversations, just to understand the other points of view.
Do you know what? Just to interrupt before you get to the Sepastopol, your experience there, what was astonishing to me as I traveled throughout Asia. I mean, I just 4 cities really, but I was 10 days and giving about 10 deliveries during those 10 days and flying as far. People don't realize how far it is to go from Mumbai to Tokyo, but that's a 9-hour flight, folks. That's a long flight. And it's much longer than from East Coast to West Coast in America. And what was astonishing to me was how heartfelt and how much tears were in people's eyes as they spoke.
Wow.
Because just what I realized, you know, we live in a culture where freedom, the word freedom, is tossed out a lot.
Right.
And sometimes is used in ways to separate people, but primarily the roots of America are a belief in freedom, and it's what stimulated our civil rights movement. It's what stimulated our entrepreneurial endeavor. It's certainly what stimulated life planning. As you were speaking about financial education, what you and I believe in is delivering freedom to everyone at all levels of society. And but understanding that money plays a role in that. So how do we do that? And what was astonishing to me in Mumbai, people were very sensitive and tender around inequality. That was a huge obstacle that was spoken. It's spoken of everywhere, but never was it spoken of so poignantly and so precisely as in Mumbai. And then action steps involved that as well. And people were very vulnerable and fragile around that. Just it's such a, I don't know if you've been to India, but it's a very,
I have not yet.
It's a tough place because people are, you don't dare give a quarter. I mean, it's a rupee, whatever. You don't dare give money to someone who's begging, because then people will surround you and you won't be able to move, basically. So it's a very, very tough environment. And it turns out that all the people that I spoke with feel that that's really profoundly important for India to solve. So it's not like we're just ignoring it and taking advantage of it. And then in Hong Kong, my God, in Hong Kong, you know, the tenderness around democracy and the fear about, you know, the imposition of the autocracy of mainland China. We see it in the news every day. But again, tears in their eyes as they talked about basic democratic freedoms that we believe in, whether it's vote or freedom to speak, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. So it was heartwarming, very moving to see these things, Kevin. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but
and very timely too.
I think it's time really everywhere, don't you? I mean,
yeah.
It's like, because what we're doing here, you know, you and I are across halfway across a continent. We're entirely on opposite ends of a continent, speaking to each other instantaneously to people who, some people are listening to us that are in Europe, for instance, right now. We may have friends who are listening to us in Asia at this moment. So it's a time when we can communicate about democracy and about a golden civilization, but not everybody lives in a system, and about equality and about what that means and opportunity. And not everybody's living in a system where where that feels possible. But given communication, it feels like it's time. It's time to
Yeah.
make it happen.
Yeah.
So
I think that,
go ahead.
sorry, I think that also brings up a point about, I think the teachings you've taught me in terms of for Evoke and life planning and this opportunity to go after freedom and finding, what I'm really passionate about and helping others find their freedom. I also realize that's a privilege too. And so I contend with that as well, understanding like I am in a position to go after that, to enact those, that freedom in my life and make those choices. And and I do feel kind of guilty sometimes that it's, not everyone has that opportunity. So I would love to ask you where, your thoughts on that and how that fits into the economic cycle and how, whether these conversations tend to happen more so in certain parts of the economic cycle or, maybe taking a step big picture, but let's table that.
No, let's talk about it, because you're right on the cusp of it. We can come back to the Sepastopol and other experiences. So I think it's a really important question. There's no question that we have privilege throughout this culture. Maybe not every corner of the culture, but a huge percentage of people living in this culture in America have a great deal of privilege, and that's also true throughout the what we have called the first world, throughout Europe, much of Europe, and Japan certainly, and even Hong Kong and Singapore are relatively well-to-do, even though they lack some of the democratic elements that we feel would really deliver freedom, and they know it. They feel that inside themselves. And I think this question of the privilege that we have to deliver freedom to others, it is a privilege. For me, it feels at this point in my life like it's much more than a privilege. It's a passion, and it's an obligation, and it's a responsibility. And when you see how, and Hong Kong's the most tender example of it right now in the news that we read. I'm sure there are many examples of it all over the world, but where you see the longing for freedom and the possibility of it, and you see just still the not allowing of it to happen, and the possibility of crackdown and all of that. I rather than feeling it as a privilege, I feel that delivering freedom into people's lives, everybody's life, means that each person there is opening up to the recognition of what freedom is, and and usually what happens, has happened for you in this process, is that there is also then a passion that is delivered inside of them to bring freedom elsewhere in the world around them. We see that in what we call the life plans or the torches of people. And sometimes it's just in their families, or sometimes it's in a little piece of green around them. But it seems that it happens everywhere. And my thought is that we all do our little bits, whatever they are. And I think every little bit counts. That's personally. And so there was a major figure, I think it was Jack Kornfield in the Vipassana tradition, who used to talk about how monks sitting up in the Himalayas, he felt, were doing as much for freedom as any of us active in the world engaged with freedom. And one of the beauties of the work you and I have done is that we both experience that deep contemplative piece, because we do some mindfulness practice as part of the basis of our work. And also we go all the way out to, the political piece. Here we are in an industry that has been rife with corruption at various times and done terrible disservice to humanity at various points. So we have, and here we are, this little corner within it, delivering it individually. Freedom here, freedom here, freedom here. Let's deliver it. Let's deliver it. Let's deliver it. My hunch is that that all in every way that we deliver freedom, we're building that golden civilization. So I think rather than guilt, I think I'd be looking at you. If I were working with you, I'd be looking at where's your passion, and let's go for it. And I know you have a passion for your family, a huge passion for your family, and I would want to build on that, because that says that your foundation of understanding what is required for freedom is solid for you. And that means that now you have a voice that speaks with authenticity and authority to others. So that's where I hope that works for you.
Absolutely. You're making it remind me, because this summer I had the opportunity. I was on paternity leave. We just had a baby, you know that. And I had a couple months to spend quality time with my family, but also to really put into action the teachings you've taught me in the Evoke process, and figuring out like your ideal week, your ideal schedule, and going after your dreams of freedom. And I had a small taste of it, but what I deeply felt it out of that and got to experience was like the joy that, you know, my family got out of it, the joy that people around me, the vitality and energy, and I want more of that.
Yeah, well,
and see how that if you multiply that by millions and millions of people, you don't need that much, but yeah.
It's like the 50th monkey, but of course there's still, wherever I see trouble, wherever I hear about a journalist being murdered or a protest group being crushed in some way, my heart breaks, and I get very concerned, and my passion says do something about it. So I post something on Facebook, trying to keep the righteous indignation alive. And yet at the same time, for me, that quiet that you felt with your family, I mean, I've had the privilege for the last 4 years of hiking the coast of Cornwall with my daughters and my wife, and oh my goodness, what a wonderful experience. And then that bonding of family is going to deliver stronger relationships for my kids going forward. Great that I can deliver that, but then also I want to deliver it where people are struggling and can't and don't have it so easily. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'm so glad you had that period of time, and I always, from talking earlier on, I get the feeling that you were very methodical, and you would deliver, but that at the same time that you had to pass certain barriers as you went along. And that you were well on that path, and it sounds like that's still the case.
Absolutely.
So what did you see, Kevin, when you went from the more corporate environment, which was wonderful? Gosh, there were such great people there. I remember was it your supervisor, just a lovely
My colleague, Miranda.
Colleague Miranda, just such a lovely woman, and so many other good people in that community that you had there. And but it was a corporate environment, and so there's also kind of the holding back that might occur, and also the values that are there maybe a little bit different. But so in Sepastopol, I mean, my remembrance of Sepastopol and the people was that a lot of them were retired already.
Yes.
And a lot of them were kind of in some activist way. I mean, often maybe as much thinkers as
Mhm.
I didn't know, but that was my experience. It was wonderful to be with them because I felt so many of them had a mentoring quality inside of
Yeah.
them. So I'm just wondering what your take was.
Those were, if I had to describe it, it was the difference in age, I think. And then the activism and the involvement in the community, what Spencer Sherman had created within Sepastopol that was very reflective of his community. And that was really interesting to be involved and again, be a fly on the wall and hear them come up with their golden civilization. I think the qualities that they envisioned were very much the same. What differed was their, the touch points where they had a lot of energy and figuring out from their perspective what the obstacles were. For them, it was isolation and illusion of separateness.
Wow. Yeah.
Fear and greed showed up again.
Yep.
I would imagine that's pretty common. You'll see that as a universal theme.
They're in every single one, it seems, just about.
Yeah.
Very powerful. Yep.
Yeah. Not surprised.
Yeah.
And then political and corporate structures was the third one,
yes.
Which it's to me is kind of reflective of that group, I think.
I think so too. And that's wonderful. And anything else there about that and the actions that, by the way, Spencer and I did a lovely Facebook Live a few weeks ago that you might.
Oh, you did?
Oh, did you see it?
No, I have not had the chance to see it. I definitely will see it.
Yeah, you should look at it. He was very, very thoughtful and self-revelatory. I mean, there were some pieces there that I hadn't known in all the years I've known him. Just lovely stuff, thinking about relationships, and I think his family, and then coming out into the world. How do we make a difference? So, yeah. So what did you see with the difference in actions? Was there anything there that you noticed?
Absolutely. So their focus was on establishing rights of nature.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. And along with that, equal access to resources. I think there was, in terms of wealth, but also natural resources that seemed to be prominent for them. Related to corporate structures and political structures, ensuring clean elections and accountability.
Yep.
I remember quite a number of deep conversations regarding that.
Yep.
And then going back to equitable redistribution of resources and wealth. So I think that was, which was interesting that especially that differed. Now, I don't think that was our focus in the group in San Francisco.
No. But there was some mention of the difference of inequality being an issue, I think.
Absolutely.
And Kevin, just for the audience sake, I've done so many of these now. I mean, we've had almost 200 of them, I think, or somewhere around 200.
Wow.
All over the world, and I've been party to maybe 60 of them, so I've seen a lot. But what did you see in the maybe 70 or 80? I don't know. But what did you see in what we call the Golden Civilization Circle, the vision? What was the vision that corresponded between the two groups?
So you're talking about what their vision for a golden civilization was? Okay. So I think honesty, caring for one another was awareness of each other, awareness of the community, people's access to resources. I think that one of the common themes was just knowledge and self-awareness.
Yeah. Right on. Yep. Yeah, beautiful. We had, as I've gone from community to community, kindness has been a huge thing, collaboration, vitality, creativity, education, clean air and water, much greater sense of equality, communication. So, and throughout, everywhere. So it's really been quite wonderful. Yeah. What's your vision?
That is a good question, George. I'm primarily focused on, my craft as a advisor, and that is the path that I've been on for a long time, and what I'm very passionate about. And I would say what I see as my contribution to the world. So I think self-awareness and financial education is the path that I foresee in helping others figure out their way to freedom, to help to live their best life. And I think I'm learning so much. I mean, you started me on this path, and I've been on this ever since then. I've been exploring really the science and research behind what you've created. Such an elegant and simple approach that I didn't realize the science that belies what you're doing. There's a book by Maura Summers, Advice That Sticks, that I think was suggested during Evoke in Hana. And I finally had a chance to read that over the summer, this golden summer of mine. And it's interesting that everything that you've talked about is what the fiduciary responsibility and the ethical responsibility we have as advisors really this process of really it's all about remaining curious and listening. And it sounds so simple, but it's so profound.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
And I've had a chance to build off of this, and I see this as my craft, and I'm very thankful for you and what you've taught.
Wow. Well, thank you. And I think when you mentioned listening and fiduciary, you've touched on two poles that are really important. The fiduciary concept being extremely important, not merely for financial advice, but I've begun to realize that it's really for institutional life. When we look at how many, the question that I ask people, I don't know whether I was asking it back in January, but it's something that I've concretized in my mind, is how come, if we are such an entrepreneurial society coming out of the great industrial revolution and all the changes that have made your lovely office space there and my home here come out with books and with computers and being able to communicate across continents and all over the world and live much longer lives. Just amazing stuff, and so much more democracy than was here 250 years ago. All those things have come out. But if we are genuinely an innovative system, an entrepreneurial system, this capitalist liberal democracy kind of system, how is it that we don't find at the top of every hierarchy of power figures of wisdom, and those figures of wisdom permeating that whole triangle, that whole hierarchy with their wisdom, so that we have wisdom kind of throughout all of society? And what I've realized is that there is something not quite right at the base of how our entrepreneurial energy is unleashed, particularly in the way we conceive of capitalism. I'm a huge believer in capitalism, so I don't want to. So that will annoy some of my friends and please others. But the truth is that the way it's been structured without a fiduciary element through every institution, you end up having inhumanity, inhumane things being promoted at some point in some way, because we think that a sale is more important than a client, as one of the ways, or we think, I mean, in the worst of it, we think a war would be helpful, or we, or we don't think about the pollution. It's not such a big deal. We brush it off. Anyway, so fiduciary is a very important term, but the other term is really deeper and more important, and that's the listening term. Because if we really learn to listen to each other, such a difference will happen in the world. So much deeper and wiser democracy will occur. So much richness within corporate life and institutional life will come because we care about each other, and we know that that's more important. That's our fiduciary responsibility. It's as much to each other within an institution as it is to all the stakeholders around it. And what a difference that makes. And the deep listening, the deepest of all, of course, is the inner listening that's more of a mindfulness basis. And that takes us to kind of the roots of everything, I think. So, yeah, lovely for you to be reflecting on those things and reading about them.
Very much so. I wonder, and I guess what I'm starting to learn also is that, I think all of us as advisors, like I spent the last 15 years building up this knowledge base and becoming, strong technically. And, I think as all advisors, we think our job is to provide solutions and provide advice. And a lot of what I'm learning is clients know themselves better than we can ever. It's more powerful, much more powerful to facilitate and help them come to answers, and then we can apply our knowledge afterwards. But it's just such a pivotal shift in my thinking.
Right.
I only wish I had known this so much earlier.
Well, there's plenty of time, my friend. Plenty of time, and you've got a lot that you're going to deliver, which is just wonderful to hear. And but it's that listening that's more than anything. I was just over at, I don't know if you know, Washington University in
St. Louis.
Yeah, a great university, as you know, really one of the best in America. And I was brought into the business school, into a program in finance. And before I gave my Golden Civilization conversation and a mindfulness speech and a life planning speech to the community, I had a group of, I think it were 7 mainland Chinese around a table. Their English was okay, it was good, reasonably good, but still a little sketchy. And then one man I think from the inner city, black man, and the professor, and a man who's been another man who's been very significant in the financial world around the dimensional kind of approach of things. So that was the group. And at one point, I was holding court around life planning and calling out for much greater integrity in financial services. And the student, because the program is primarily around financial instruments, really, finance, right?
Yeah.
And so this one very intelligent Chinese young man said, well, what's all this stuff with clients and everything? I mean, isn't it enough? I mean, isn't our job just to create really the instruments that have the greatest integrity they could possibly have, and sell them from the bank? And I said, yeah, I think that's wonderful, and that's part of integrity, because I was talking about both wisdom and integrity of the whole system. And I said, that's wonderful, but what if what you're selling isn't what the client really needs?
Yeah.
You could be selling something that you have designed that has impeccable integrity in terms of its relationship, its betas and its alphas and all the rest, and yet what the client needs is something else. You sell something that has very low risk, and they need something that's more dynamic, or you sell something
Yeah.
that's more dynamic and they need a lower risk vehicle, or you sell something and what you sell has great good value, but in fact you add a very high fee on it, and in fact there's other places where you can get it at much less. So the integrity has to do much more with relationship ultimately. Yes, please build those wonderful products that have great integrity within them.
Yeah.
But don't forget, it's the consumer that really you want the greatest integrity with of all. So
You had a
yeah.
you had a line in your book, and oh yeah, delivered without unbiased advice, financial products only provoke and exploit our acquisitive nature. Yeah, I have like pages, tons of notes on this. Like, greatest products that we own are lifetime freedom and health. Wow.
Yeah. It's just it's really ultimately not about the products that we sell. It's much more about who we are as human beings, about our life, and discovering freedom, and living in a way that lives freedom with so much vitality and creativity that our life is infectious, and other people want to know how we do it, and we've got the capacity, by having gone through a process of testing ourselves, to deliver it to other people. Freedom is what we were born for. We were not born to be slaves, human beings. And it's one of the reasons that autocracy will never work. And it's one of the reasons that corporate structures right now need to be re-examined and thought about, because there's a hierarchy within them where you really are simply serving the hierarchy, even though there's much good happening within them. How do we make it so that it really is human and humane? And I think that's the task of this generation. I think we're up for it.
Love it. George, I have a question for you. So I had the privilege of being in Hana before you released the book. And we got to read the first couple of chapters and be part of the first few conversations. I think it was one of the first few. I've heard it sounds like you're gaining a lot of speed, and I'm curious to know what you've learned from the initial ones and how it's changed over time and what has worked.
Well, where we are right now, I mean, it's a very small, we've got a very small staff, but there's passion for it now. We've now taken it, I think, to five of the 6 continents, and in many countries all over the world. And what we are now at this point, I think, attempting to do is to build much stronger ongoing conversations, so people recognize that even if our politicians can't do it for us, we can do it. This is participative democracy. We can do it. And I think that's one of the things we really need to do, because of the trouble that money in politics have created. We've really lost our sense of really even being a democracy when we have the politicians largely elected by big money from corporations, or big money from billionaires, or elected by, we don't think about this as much, but big money in the media or in nonprofits. So we really need to take our democracy seriously. One of the things I've learned is that sustainability of the planet, which is something that many of us are concerned about, I don't think it's possible without sustainability of democracy. So I'm passionate about kind of spreading that and building the sustainability of the conversations that we have. So that's where I'm attempting to move with my staff here, and with each conversation that we deliver, we're finding out when the next one's going to be and when the next one might be, so that they do on Go.
Yeah.
And create. And then the second thing after that is then creating communication between groups. So if Sepastopol, for instance, were continuing, or your group were continuing, they might be fascinated by the work that's being done in London or Mumbai or here in Boston or in Tokyo. Let's bring the groups that are doing similar kinds of work together, and let's begin to create pages where people can say, this is what we've done, and ways then for communities to interlink. So that's where I'm going with it now. And I think the other thing that I'm realizing, Kevin, is that, I mean, as you know, there are many kind of radical ideas in the book. And by radical, I just mean that they're revolutionary, they're different, they're unusual, and yet very thoughtful and have a lot of science at their base. And one of those radical notions is that we've got an opportunity here now. You and I were talking about this at the beginning. Here we are, we're suddenly communicating all over the globe instantaneously. And democracy has taken off so that it's a huge value, even though right now some of us feel that it's becoming threatened a bit. The truth is that you look over 250 years and we are enormously democratic as a civilization compared to what we were 250 years ago. So to take that momentum and explode it and just say, yes, this is it. And it's time to build what we need to make a sustainable civilization so that our Earth can become sustainable, so that we don't have a fallback position of warring and killing each other, so that corruption is completely eliminated. There's no reason for corruption at all. These are things that can be solved and can be solved within a generation. And I think that many of us are beginning to feel that they must be solved within a generation. And I think that the Golden Civilization movement is one of the only movements that's saying it's time. And it's time to do it in a hurry and completely. Let's make it happen. Anything else?
I'm curious to know what has surprised you over a lot, like in terms of what you expected and what has surprised you.
You mean in terms of taking this around the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been stunned. I've been totally stunned that people love it. I've been stunned by their tears. I think what surprised me most is that the communities that are less secure than America feel even more kind of heartened by the Golden Civilization approach. In a way, they long for it even more than we do, because we take so much of it for granted already, and that makes me feel very close to them. The last time I was in India, I didn't know if I'd go back because it's such a difficult place to be. And when I got given this opportunity to do a keynote over there, and moreover to go to Tokyo, Mumbai, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Singapore as well, I didn't hesitate a moment. I just said, come on, let's go. And because I knew that I wanted to speak and see what happened. But it's been stunning to me how moved people have been, and how much they surround me do you know that well, here even at Washington University. So I was at Washington University and at the business school there. And we tend to think of business schools as being relatively conservative places. But in every business school that I've gone to, Coventry was one of them in England. I think there was one in California, and now at Washington University. Coventry and Washington University, the audience was, I would say, 60% from different countries. Most of them people of color, not like me, white, Caucasian, whatever. So they were diverse and they were dynamic, coming from these different cultures. And they were coming to business school and they wanted to deliver things entrepreneurially out into the world or to make a
Mm.
difference. But they came from cultures that often had kind of restrictions on freedom.
Yeah.
They were each of these. I mean, at Washington University, I mean, same thing at Coventry. Coventry had a dozen of the 60 people that were in the audience. Maybe more came up to me afterwards and said, I want to deliver a golden civilization conversation. I want to take this out and deliver it. And at Washington University, there were, it was a similar response. And the professor afterwards kind of spoke to me, and he was stunned afterwards. And he said, you know, usually when I bring in a guest speaker, there are 3 or 4 people that crowd around him or her after that. He said there were 15 or 20 people crowded around you, and they couldn't get enough of you. I think they had not seen this imaginative approach to kind of the institutional choices that we've taken. And so I think that surprised me more than anything, that people are welcoming this when we get a chance to put it out in front of them.
I would agree. I think from my experience in running, participating in the conversation with you, I've had close friends, from that were invited that participated in it, and I didn't. It was very illuminating to see their passion on what they were passionate about that I had no clue, and deliver it and really want to go after it. And so I think I would add that as another benefit of this, is that, to open the conversation and see different points of view, especially even people closely.
It's funny that you say that, because usually we think of that in life planning. We think about it as life planning couples, because couples, we're worried about this couple wanting this person wanting this person wanting that. But in fact, what we find is they go, oh, wow, you still like that? Or, oh, well, I didn't know you loved that. And they fall in love again. And so it's interesting hearing you say, I'd never heard you say that about, or never heard it said about corporations before. But I think it's very valuable within a corporate structure. It's always a little dicey because there is the corporate point of view, and it's difficult to step outside that with your voice. But nonetheless, within it, how valuable to be able to speak your mind and to share what you think would make a golden civilization, and to look at as a community what you could do within the corporation, and even as outreach from the corporation. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Anything else?
No, I'm just happy to see you. I was really excited and admittedly a little nervous, but that was unfounded. And but yeah, thank you again.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Kevin, and keep going and keep in touch. Really wonderful to touch base with you again.
Well, hopefully I'll see you in person soon.
I look forward to that. Great. All right. Thanks so much. My best to all your mates. All right.
I'll let them know. Good seeing you, George.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye.